Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. Tonight, we sail into waters where even the dead refuse to sink. The freighter Hallowford moved like a ghost across the Atlantic. Her hull, patched from too many storms and too many wars, groaned with each swell. She'd once carried munitions, then wounded men, and now, just cargo no one cared to name. It was 1947, 2 years after the war, but the smell of it still lingered on her decks. Oil, salt, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood hidden deep in the steel. Elias Crowe was new to the crew. Just 19, lean, and desperate for the pay, he'd signed on in Liverpool with barely a glance at the contract. The others had smirked when he told them he'd be working the night watch. No one liked the night watch on the Hallowford. The ship's schedule was simple. 3 shifts: day, evening, and graveyard. The last was the one nobody wanted, and when Elias volunteered, no one warned him why. They just muttered things like, "You'll see or keep your ears shut." The captain, a gaunt man with eyes like burned coals, handed him a battered flashlight and said, "Stay on the upper deck after midnight. Don't go near the forward hold. And whatever you hear, don't answer back." Elias thought it was just sailor superstition. He'd grown up with ghost stories, the kind told in pubs to scare kids into coming home early. A creaking old freighter was bound to have its share of strange noises. Nothing to fear. The first few hours of his shift passed in cold monotony. He paced the slick deck under dim running lights, the sea a vast ink-black void stretching in every direction. The only sounds were the hum of the engine far below, the slap of waves against the hull, and the groan of steel under strain. The crew had mostly gone below to their bunks. Elias passed the time checking his watch, smoking the captain's harsh rationed cigarettes, and peering into the fog that crept along the deck rails. He thought he saw shapes in it once or twice, but it was just the wind-sculpting mist. Then the ship's bell rang 3 times. It wasn't supposed to. The bell only rang to mark the hour, and the forward bell, hung above the prow, wasn't connected to any clock. It had to be struck by hand. Elias froze listening. The sound had come from the forward hold, exactly where he'd been told not to go. He told himself it was a prank, the older crew trying to spook the rookie. But as he stepped closer, the air grew colder, unnaturally so. His breath fogged. The ship's steady thrum seemed to fade, replaced by a faint humming. A low, steady vibration, as if someone or something was chanting far below deck. He shined his flashlight toward the forward hatch. It was open, just a crack. The heavy steel latch swung gently, though there was no wind. The humming grew louder, and now he could make out words. Not in English. Not in any language he knew. They rose and fell like the tide, and something in the sound made his skin crawl, like the chant was being whispered directly into his skull. Behind him, the deck boards creaked. He turned. No one there. When he turned back, the hatch was open wider. From the darkness inside, the smell hit him. Salt, yes, but mixed with rot. Not the rot of fish or food, the rot of something that had once been alive and shouldn't be anymore. The humming stopped. In the silence, he heard a single wet, dragging step on the deck just beyond the hatch. Then another, and then breathing. Not heavy, not fast, just slow and steady. Waiting. Elias's flashlight flickered. He backed away. The captain's warning echoed in his head. "Whatever you hear, don't answer back." The breath came closer. And then, in the dark, a voice rasped his name. The voice was like rust scraping steel, low, drawn out, and full of seawater. "Elias." Elias took another step back, heart hammering, the flashlight trembling in his grip. His name shouldn't sound wet. But here, on the open deck, it did. Each syllable bubbling, as if spoken from a mouth that hadn't breathed air in years. He wanted to run, but the night air pressed down heavy. The Hallowford had gone silent. No engine, No crew, no gulls. Even the sea itself felt muted, the waves too soft against the hull, as if the ocean was holding its breath. From the crack in the forward hatch, something pale moved. A hand, bloated, slick fingers webbed with strands of kelp, slid slowly into view. It gripped the steel lip of the hatch, nails long and gray like cracked shells. The skin looked waterlogged, ready to slough off. Elias stumbled backward, and the flashlight beam darted wildly, catching the ship's bell above. It was swaying on its own now, no wind, no rope. And with each sway it groaned like an old man trying to breathe. Then came the sound from below, the thump of something heavy dragging across the lower deck. It wasn't alone. A chorus of voices joined the first, low at first, then rising together in an awful harmony. They weren't singing, they were calling, words from the deep, vowels stretched and warped, consonants swallowed in water. The rhythm was like waves hitting the hull, but wrong, backwards, against the current. Elias could feel it in his bones. A pulse, a pull, like the ship itself was tilting toward them. The forward hatch swung open fully with a metallic scream. The pale hand withdrew, and in its place, a face rose into view. It wasn't complete. Eyes clouded over, lips peeled back to bone in places, the jaw slack and crooked. The sea had gnawed at it. A tangle of hair drifted in an unseen current, swaying gently in the still air. It didn't blink. It just stared at him, water spilling from its mouth in slow drips that pattered on the deck. Each drop felt loud, too loud. Behind it, in the shadows, more shapes were moving. Faces just like it. Dozens, all rising, all watching, all silent now, except for the sound of their breath. The captain's warning clawed at Elias's mind. Whatever you hear, don't answer back. But the voice spoke again. Not his name this time. Something else. A question. He didn't understand the words, but he knew it wanted him to come closer. And before he could stop himself, Elias whispered, "What are you?" The change was instant. The air cracked, as though a depth charge had gone off somewhere far below. The ship groaned, tilting. Water surged from the hatch, pooling across the deck and soaking his boots. The pale faces surged upward, their mouths opening wider than they should, teeth black and sharp, throats spilling brine. The first one stepped onto the deck. Bare feet slapped the steel, skin split where it bent. It never broke eye contact. And far below, something huge knocked against the hull. The knock came again, deep, resonant, like a fist the size of a lifeboat slamming against the hull. The steel shuddered beneath Elias's feet. He stumbled backward into the wheelhouse bulkhead just as a door slammed open behind him. It was First Mate Harlan, still in his undershirt, eyes wild. "Crowe, what in hell are you?" He stopped cold when he saw the open hatch, and the figures now spilling out of it. Harlan swore under his breath and yanked a flare gun from the wall. He fired without aiming, the red light exploding across the deck. It bathed the pale shapes in bloodlight, revealing slick skin stretched over bone, uniforms half rotted from another war entirely. Water poured steadily from their mouths, pooling at their feet and steaming in the cold air. Elias saw the flare light glint off something in their eyes, not life, not light, but reflection, like deep water catching the moon. "Get to the mess hall," Harlan barked. "Now." Another knock, louder, this one closer to the waterline. The Hallowford rolled slightly with it, a wave breaking hard against her starboard side. The crew began to emerge, half-awake men in grease-stained shirts blinking against the cold. Shouts rose, but they died quickly as everyone saw the same thing. The dead were boarding. They didn't climb like living men. They rose with the water, feet finding impossible purchase on the dripping hull, hands gripping seams in the steel. One by one, they pulled themselves over the rails, their movements jerky and soundless, except for the slap of wet flesh on metal. Elias and Harlan backed toward the mess as the captain appeared at the far end of the deck, oilskin coat flapping, his eyes locked on the intruders. He didn't shout orders, didn't ask questions. He simply lifted a length of iron pipe and planted his boots. The first of the boarders stepped toward him. It wore the tatters of a World War II naval coat, rank stripes still visible beneath barnacles. Its jaw hung loose, the hinge shattered, swinging as it moved. The smell that came with it, rot and diesel, hit the crew like a blow. The captain spoke then, low but clear. "You shouldn't be here." The thing stopped, its head cocked sideways as if considering the words. Then it smiled. Its teeth, too many, too sharp, flashed in the flare's dying light. The captain didn't wait. He swung the pipe, catching the thing across the skull. Bone cracked, but instead of falling, it only turned back toward him, smile widening, a string of seawater arcing from its lips. From the forward hatch, more were coming. Harlan shoved Elias into the mess hall and slammed the door. The room was already filling with crew, wide-eyed, muttering, clutching anything that could be used as a weapon. The cook had his butcher's cleaver. A deckhand gripped a marlin spike so hard his knuckles were white. "What are they?" Elias asked, breathless. No one answered, but the old engineer in the corner, the one the crew called Whisper Tom, finally spoke. "They were on this ship before we were." The room went still. Another knock from outside. This one wasn't on the hull, it was on the mess hall door. The knock at the mess hall door was deliberate. 3 heavy raps, pause, 3 more. It wasn't pounding to break in, it was knocking to be let in. The crew froze, every breath held. Even the engine's vibration seemed to still beneath them. The captain's voice came faintly through the steel. "Stay where you are." But the words sounded wrong, flattened as if spoken through a throat full of water. Harlan took a step toward the door. "Captain?" No answer, just the sound of boots on the deck outside, dragging. 1 step, then a slide, then another step. Closer. Whisper. Tom pushed himself up from his bench in the corner. His hands shook as he fished something from his coat pocket, a brass compass, its glass face cracked. He held it out for Elias. "Look." The needle spun wildly, clicking against the sides, never settling. "This ship's not heading for Cardiff anymore," Tom muttered. "Where then?" Elias asked. Tom's sunken eyes lifted toward the ceiling. Down. The mess hall lights flickered. Not from power failure, something deeper, like the light itself was drowning. The air thickened, heavy with a brine smell so strong Elias tasted salt at the back of his throat. Outside, footsteps moved along the deck, too many to count now. Wet, patient steps pacing the hall. Some passed by, others stopped directly outside the door. Knock, pause, knock. One of the younger deckhands lost his nerve. "I'm not staying in here," he shouted, lunging for the door latch. Harlan grabbed him, but too late. The door swung open a crack. A hand shot through, bloated and bone-white, the fingernails curling like yellowed shells. It gripped the young man's collar with inhuman strength and yanked. The crew swarmed, pulling him back. He screamed, kicking, as more hands appeared in the gap, dozens, each slick and strong and cold as steel. They managed to slam the door, but not before a pale face pressed into the gap, its mouth moving silently, lips black, teeth like jagged coral. It smiled as the door shut. The smile burned into Elias's mind. The captain's voice came again, closer this time. "Open the door." "No," Harlan whispered, as if afraid the voice could hear. Elias moved to the porthole and peered out. The deck beyond was wrong. The ocean had vanished into a rolling gray fog so thick it looked solid. No horizon, no stars. And in the fog, dark shapes drifted alongside the ship. Shadowy outlines of other vessels, their decks crowded with still figures, all watching the Hallowford. The compass in Tom's hand spun faster. The lights flickered once more, then died completely. From somewhere deep in the ship's hull came a groan, long, low, and pained. The Hallowford had changed course, and now something else was steering. In the dark, the Hallowford felt alive. Not the hum of machinery, but something deeper, like the slow pulse of a sleeping animal, and it was waking. Harlan snapped orders in a harsh whisper. "We move, quiet, to the bridge." No one argued. Staying in the mess hall meant waiting for the knocking to come back. They moved in a tight knot, boots silent on the steel as they made their way through the narrow passage. The air was damp here, beating on their skin, but it wasn't from sea spray. This was condensation, heavy and warm, like the inside of a lung. As they passed the crew quarters, Elias caught sight of an open door. Inside, hammocks swayed gently, but not from the ship's movement. Something unseen moved between them, the fabric bulging and shifting as if a body slid beneath each one. No one was in the bunks, no one living anyway. "Keep walking," Harlan hissed. The climb to the bridge was slow, every groan of the ship's frame sounding like it might give them away. From outside, faint thuds still echoed along the deck, wet feet moving with purpose. When they reached the bridge door, Harlan raised a hand for silence. He leaned in, ear to the steel. Elias did the same. Inside, they could hear it, breathing, not one breath, but many, overlapping, slow, heavy, and underneath it, a sound like ropes dragging across the floor. Harlan glanced at the men. "Ready?" He turned the wheel latch and eased the door open. The bridge was dimly lit by the glow of the instrument panels, though some of the gauges were cracked, their needles twitching in slow arcs. And at the helm stood the captain, or what was left of him. His oilskin coat was torn, and his head hung at an unnatural angle, as though his neck had been broken and never set right. His skin glistened wet in the instrument glow, and when he turned, Elias saw water running steadily from his mouth, dripping onto the floor in a constant patter. Behind him, the wheel spun gently, though no one touched it. The ship's course was holding steady into the endless fog, but they weren't alone. Shapes crouched in the corners, some in tattered Navy uniforms, others naked and slick as if freshly pulled from the sea. Their eyes shone faintly in the dim light, all fixed on the crew at the door. The captain's voice came, low and wrong. "You shouldn't be here." Harlan gripped his flare gun, but before he could raise it, one of the crouched figures surged forward on all fours, its limbs bending backward like broken masts. It stopped inches from Elias's boots, head snapping upward to stare into his eyes. Its mouth opened, not to speak, but to release a stream of dark water that pooled around his shoes. Another figure rose from the shadows, moving toward the helm. Long, pale fingers gripped the wheel alongside the captain's. The moment they touched it, the compass on the main console spun violently, then stopped dead, pointing not north, but straight down. The ship's engines roared to life, the Hallowford shuddered, and in the fog outside, something vast began to move beneath the water. The Hallowford groaned as the deck tilted forward, the sea's horizon vanishing beneath a wall of fog. The compass needle on the helm did not move. It stayed fixed, pointing down. Harlan fired the flare gun into the bridge ceiling. The burst of red light seared the air, shadows flinching away for an instant. The crouched things hissed like boiling water, their eyes flaring white. But the captain, whatever was left of him, didn't move. He just turned the wheel harder. The floor pitched, and Elias had to grab a rail to keep from sliding toward the helm. The roar of the engines deepened, the whole ship shuddering as though something below had hooked her and was reeling her in. From outside, a deep vibration swelled, a low, thrumming moan that seemed to come from the sea itself. The fog beyond the bridge windows churned, parting just enough to reveal shapes moving beneath the surface. They were impossibly large, hulking shadows that dwarfed the ship, circling slowly. Then, without warning, the first of them rose. It broke the surface without a splash, a pale, ribbed mass of something like flesh and coral covered in barnacles the size of barrels. No eyes, no face, just ridges that pulsed with the rhythm of the sound, like a heartbeat amplified through the ocean. The crew panicked. One man bolted from the bridge, disappearing down the companionway. The moment he hit the deck, the pale figures waiting outside fell on him. His scream was cut short, swallowed by the fog. Inside, the captain's mouth opened wider than humanly possible, water gushing out in torrents across the floor. His voice was layered now, dozens speaking through him at once. Below. The crouched creatures surged forward not to attack, but to herd, pushing Elias, Harlan, and the few left toward the open bridge doors. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing close, muffling all sound except the groan of the hull and the water's pull. Elias caught Harlan's arm. "We jump, now." Harlan shook his head. "Not in this water." But they had no choice. The deck beneath their feet was slick with seawater, and the ship's bow had already begun to sink. The Hallowford was going under. They climbed the starboard rail as the ship tilted, the fog swallowing the sky above. The pale shapes gathered at the rails too, staring down at the black water as if awaiting something. It came. From below, a massive shape rose, breaking the surface in silence, a gaping circular maw lined with teeth like rusted harpoons, opening wider and wider until it spanned the width of the ship's hull. The Hallowford slid toward it. Elias felt himself pulled by the suction, his boots scraping the steel. He clung to the rail until his fingers screamed, but the pull was too strong. Around him, the pale crew of the deep leapt willingly, vanishing into the maw. Harlan's hand locked onto his wrist at the last moment, yanking him back against the rail. "Hold!" Harlan started, but the rail tore loose from the sinking deck. Both men were thrown into the air. Elias hit the water hard, the cold knocking the breath from his lungs. He kicked wildly, breaking the surface just in time to see the Hallowford vanish bow first into the waiting mouth below. The fog closed over it. The suction stopped. Silence. He treaded water, gasping, but there was no ship, no crew, just the endless fog. Something brushed his leg. A hand, cold fingers curled around his ankle, and a voice, waterlogged, patient, rose from below. "Your watch isn't over." The pull began. Elias didn't fight. If this voyage chilled the marrow in your bones, like this video, share it with those who think the sea is safe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe before the next watch begins for you. The vault is always open.